Welcome to the Material Writers Special Interest Group Forum for JALT 2021. This year's topic is the business side of independent writing and publishing. My name is John Carle, and I'm the program chair for the MW-SIG. This year's invited guest speakers are John Spiri, Gregg McNabb, and Sean Anderson. This will be a 90-minute forum. We'll start out with brief introductions for each of the speakers, focusing on their professional publications. Each speaker will then have 20 minutes to share their stories and insights about the publication business. We hope that this talk will not only inform, but inspire others to embark on the journey themselves. John Spiri is a tenured professor at Gifu Shotoku Gakuen University. He is a prolific writer with nearly 20 textbooks published. John is the president of Global Stories Press. He has a great deal of knowledge and experience in the independent publication business. He resides in Shiga with his wife, 2 sons, 3 dogs, and numerous silky chickens, which I may ask about later. Gregg McNabb is a tenured professor at the Shizuoka Institute of Science and Technology. He has written numerous textbooks, including TOEIC Prep, short stories, and a full-scale reading textbook. He has also co-authored a Ministry of Education authorized textbook, which has been used by tens of thousands of junior and senior high school students in Japan. He has published independently as well as with established publishing houses such as Kinseido. Sean Anderson has published an English teaching card game and a fan graphic novel based on the popular game Street Fighter. Most recently, Sean formed a new team, and together they now self-publish the popular language learning manga Crystal Hunters. This series is consistently listed as an Amazon bestseller in comics and manga in Japanese. His manga are produced in several languages, including Japanese, English, Spanish, and German. John Carle, by the way, that's me. I teach at Kindai University and have published 2 textbooks through my company Oak Hills Press. Recently, I have created a digital workbook in collaboration with the IT educational company Zengengo.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to share some stories about, my experiences. I'm not really fond of monologues, so please feel free you can write something in the chat. Hopefully I'll catch it, or you can interrupt me if your video is on, but nobody's video is on except Paul. You could just signal you want to say something. I don't mind. So I'm starting at the beginning, getting started with your own publishing. And I broke my talk here about this focus area, two aspects is the method and the content. So of course I'm thinking in terms of textbook writing. Now, I don't know that everybody, that's what is your interest, but probably for the most part, and that's my experience. So, so for the method, first of all, I'll tell how I got involved in the method with a little story. This goes way back to when I first arrived in Japan, and I was still on a tourist visa, and I had to take, we called it the Korea Shuffle. I went over to Seoul to renew my tourist visa. I had a job aligned, but it wasn't ready to get the visa yet. So I went to the bookstore in Seoul, and I went on a shopping spree with Oxford teacher resource material books. I got a bunch of them. And among them was a book called Dictogloss by Ruth. And then she's got a lot of consonants together in her name, Warjib or something. And it just, it really moved me. I thought the method was excellent, both when I first read about it and I started using it in classes. Just very briefly, I mean, it's a type of dictation. I don't think I ever really used it exactly as she presented it. It was kind of radical, her method, like you kind of forget about the original text. But I adapted a lot of what she wrote into my classroom activities. And I loved it for various reasons. I loved it because stronger students could help weaker students easily with that activity. Thank you. I loved it because I could tweak the narratives like on the fly. like maybe just before class, like I would have sentences ready, right? That's the dictation sentences, the audio. I would always just read it, and I could make it easier. I could make it harder. I could speak it faster. I could speak it slower. So it was very easy to manipulate to my situation. And it just so consistently worked. And I could use any content, right? Any topic that I wanted to bring in to supplement, the textbook that I had. So I love this method. I was so excited about it. And okay, so that's the method. So I think I wanted to do more with that method. And then as far as the content, I really think it starts with, it was the Iraq war period. And, I kind of considered myself an activist, and I was into global issues. And I wanted, I don't think the material, in fact, it wasn't really political per se, but I wanted to bring out like real stories about like child soldiers, kids living in poverty. So my first book was Global Stories. And I used this really heavy content because I got these true stories by looking on the internet. And I gave students, the real thing. Like, for example, maybe I'm going to shock you, but, one of the pictures, it was showing the child slave, they were factory slaves, and he tried to escape, and then he was beaten. It didn't show like blood or anything, but it actually, in the illustration that I got, it was very descriptive for that. And I think over time, I came to kind of see it as it didn't need to be that explicit. But still, I think I brought in content that you just wouldn't find in any other textbooks, of a big publisher. So I'll just use that opportunity to point out, maybe it's obvious that, a big publisher, they want material that's going to have the broadest possible appeal always. So the way I see self-publishing is your niche idea. And, especially if your approach is like mine was, that I just want something, first of all, and most importantly, that I'm going to use with my students, then, I don't have to answer to the broad appeal part. Now, of course, there is a danger in it. Maybe somebody would say, well, that was too heavy for students. But I think if you're creating materials, first, of course, you're observing the way the students react. But I always did surveys. I always got the views of students, and they were on board with it. And I can make a second point related to that. I think people who make their own materials often say, my students love it. It really works. And the thing is, I think there's a real phenomena where when you're that invested in it, right, that you've taken the time, you've made the materials, and you're almost desperate to make it work, that it does tend to be more successful. So I guess my point is, for example, if I ran a department and I forced, let's say, 5 other faculty members to use my textbook, especially the early version that had these kind of shocking stories, I think they would have had a hard time with it. They wouldn't have believed in it, and probably the students wouldn't have liked it that much. So, so making your own material, that's kind of a plug to make your own materials, I think, because of the level of investment we have in it. It pays off in the classroom, or at least it can. All right, so that's my getting started story. Those are the very early years. The Global Stories book took on many new forms. I think it's in the 4th edition. And what I ended up doing, it had 6 pictures that corresponded to the dictation sentences. And I just took out the 2 harshest pictures to soften it. And it's still pretty serious topics, child slaves and child soldiers. But once I had that method, John introduced me being prolific. A lot of the textbooks I have are just plugging different content into a very similar structure for the textbook. So, and which features the dictation or dictogloss activity along with illustrations. And it might be of interest to say in the beginning, I always got illustrations. illustrations you have to pay for. You know, I was very low budget. I found some beginning illustrators and paid that way. But after that, I kind of moved to photos because stock sites, I would pay for that too, but you could pay one amount and get lots of stock photos. And now you might be aware there are free stock photo sites. I feel bad for photographers, but I mean, first things first, you try to do things that are best for you. And then, you know, if I was capable of making donations to photographers. But anyways, so there's a lot of stock photo sites and some completely free. So you can get a lot of images either very cheaply or even free nowadays. All right, so that was the first part of it. I'm just occasionally checking the time. The second part is about whether you're a team or a partners or going it alone. So my joke that I've made often is Global Stories Press. That's my company. Global Stories Press is another way of saying John Spiri. So in other words, I'm a one-man show, basically. If you get into the communication with the bookstores, my wife would disagree that I do it alone. She helps a lot in that area. But as far as making the material, testing it, etc., I do it all. I'm not sure that's the best way, but frankly, I'm not a great team player. I kind of like doing things myself. I like the feeling of like I did every aspect of this. But one example of something that probably you would want to think about is your website, right? Hiring out a professional. So over the years, many of my websites look pretty not very attractive. They were the best I could do using Dreamweaver or some other software. I think I've upped the game a little bit. It looks a little bit better, but that's an example. So if you have an opportunity to bring, if you have a partner, let's say a colleague, it certainly is advantageous if you have another person who is like-minded to work on it with you. But my path has just been doing things myself, and I do think there's a certain amount of satisfaction with that. Like with the website, if you hire out somebody, to me, just the bother of getting all the materials and trying to explain what I want, it seemed like it would be so much work and doing that well, why don't I just do it myself, figure out, and then I learn a skill too. So as you're going along. So probably as you're listening to the other speakers too, what you'd want to think about is this kind of like, do you consider yourself a publisher, like you want it to be your main job source of income, or is it just something on the side? So for me, it's very much something on the side, right? So I'm a full-time university teacher, and this is something I can learn some skills. I can use it for my students, and if it goes beyond, that's great. I'm happy. But if not, it's okay. I'm not relying on success. Financial success, we'll say, for the company. All right. So anybody have a question as I'm going? I can't even see. I see Paul there, but I'll continue here. So part 3, what I'm going to talk about is just some challenges that have occurred. So in the very beginning, the very first Global Stories textbook that I printed, so my books have always been print form paper. The paper was glossy. This is something you really don't, you got to be careful about. So students did complain about that book. You can't really write in pencil in it. You had to write in pen. They don't like to write in pen. There was a lot of writing necessary in the textbook. So being very careful about the paper, really knowing what you're getting is something to keep in mind. And then a connected challenge is the print run. So, I'm not sure. All right, very basically, right? Well, there's more print on demand now a little bit, but basically if you go to a printer, if you print, for example, 1,000 copies, your per copy cost is really getting down there. Let's say for 1,000 copies of a 80-page color book, maybe 350 yen per copy. If you print 500 copies, right? 500 copies, it is cheaper, of course. You're getting half as many, but the per copy cost is like maybe 550 yen, right? So quite a bit more, not quite double. Well, it wouldn't be double, but quite a bit more anyways. So I tended to print, and I'm unreasonably optimistic. So I tended to print 1,000 copies, and I would definitely recommend not doing that, because I printed, I've done both, but mainly I've printed overseas. My main printer has always been in Korea, and he does a good job. It's a good product, I think a good price. So yeah, so be careful in print rates. Maybe some of the other speakers are going to talk about that. It's a really big issue, how many you print, but I want to look into more now, like even smaller print runs, because the thing I was going to say is you're going to want to change it. No matter how much you like it, especially if you're doing it alone. Of course, I trialed the materials beforehand, but still, you're going to want to change it. You're probably going to find at least a couple mistakes. So 1,000 print runs is like, yeah, that's a hard to move. Now, it depends how many textbooks you're selling a semester, of course. If you have guaranteed sales of 300, then maybe, it's not a bad idea. All right, so that was another mistake. Another mistake that came one time, I didn't include printed in Korea. It's supposed to be on, that kind of copyright page in the beginning, and customs wouldn't allow it to come in. So that was pretty shocking, but my printer, he took care of it completely. He paid to have labels sent and pasted on all the books. So so if it's printed overseas, you got to include that in your file. I always create with InDesign PDFs made from InDesign software, which is software I love. In fact, it's the only, I'm not a computer guy. It's the only software where I love. I still get excited when I open an InDesign. It's Adobe InDesign file. There's a couple, of course, there's also mistakes. As I said, you're going to make mistakes, probably be left like just spelling or something. One time the printer printed the wrong, he printed an old version, and that was a big problem. So there were big mistakes. The whole page was wrong, and he used an old file. So that wasn't my mistake, though. All right, so those are some challenges that come up. I was going to talk a little bit about my readers. Should I go on readers if there's no questions? Yeah. The only thing is it's kind of a long, I'll try to make this really quick. So that's a story too. I mean, that really started me reading a magazine when I lived and taught English in Taiwan. It was about people talking about their jobs. So I started interviewing Japanese people. Those interviews were published in Kansai Time Out magazine. This is going back quite a long time ago. And then I just enjoyed interviewing people so much. I went to Southeast Asia. I went to Korea. I went to Taiwan and interviewed people. Of course, I had translators, people helping me. And I had all the notes. So I ended up, to make a long story very short, making all these readers. So there's 5 in the Asians at Work series. I always thought about making them graded. I go through the software, and you can put the text in, and it tells you, maybe it shows you the red for the words that are too difficult, etc. But my sense of what the students know was very, very different. It never really came out the way I thought it should come out. And in the end, I just made them all authentic readers. So they're still easier than normal native speaker text, because they all dealt with translation. Either I spoke Japanese with the Japanese, or there was some translator involved. So yeah, I hope this is like kind of applicable. Of course, I don't know everybody's situations, but I would just say, yeah, if you have some ideas regarding the methodology and the content, pursue it. I think if you bring it in the classroom, it has a much better chance at success. I feel, because of the investment you put in it. It means a lot to me to have my materials in the classroom. It makes the class more interesting. There's nobody to blame. If I have a boring textbook that somebody else wrote, I can just complain about it. But if it's mine, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to have new ideas. So I think it helps my teaching. It helps my job satisfaction. So if anybody has questions for me, or I think at the end we're going to have a question section too, that would kind of be helpful to know what you all have in mind, the audience, or what your plans and needs are.
Anyway, thank you to everyone for coming on this over here anyway, beautiful Saturday afternoon in Shizuoka. And I hope that I can introduce you to aspects of the actual overall process. And my take is from the mass market textbook perspective. So unlike John, I didn't want to just simply have a few copies sold necessarily and for a very small audience. I hope to make money and sell as many textbooks as I could. So I will show you first one. This one was produced in Taiwan and published in Taiwan and used here in Japan and in Taiwan. And it's a co-authored book. And John was just mentioning before about paper. And this one is paper, like the copy paper that you use. And so it uses very different kind of printing process. And then he also spoke just a few minutes ago rather, about gloss. And so you have to, as he said, you have to be careful about gloss, which is actually clay-based paper. But this particular paper is okay. You can use a pencil. You can use an HB pencil. You don't want to use a really hard pencil. And of course, you can use ink. Okay, that just came to mind. So now I'm going to share my screen, right? Hang on a second here, everyone. I haven't done this for a bit. Okay, well, I'll try this. It's Keynote. Is that going to be good? I hope so. Okay, so now you probably see my messy screen and part of my presentation. Is that right? Okay, now you see a little bit better screen. Okay, very good. So I'm changing from a black background to a dark green background. I hope the dark green background is easy to read. So these are some of the books that I've published that John first mentioned, and the ones in the center there with no title are called Shiroba. If you want to know, Shiroba is a white version, and white version is the final version before a textbook becomes an actual authorized textbook by the Ministry of Education. And so there are actually 3 of them there. I thought it was only 2, but I guess there's 3 series. In any event, they are published in Kansai. And originally, I never planned to do that. I'm now doing background. Originally, I never planned to do that at all, but I was planning to do a textbook using the internet. And this is in the 1990s, which shows you how old I am. And one of my colleagues at a university said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't know anything about the internet. Well, yes, that's the point of doing the book. But why don't we do this one instead? So, okay, we did this one instead. And it took a lot of effort, a lot of meetings, and quite a bit of arguing. For example, you can't use names like Huang or Juanita or any kind of foreign name back then. It had to be Tom and Mike and Mary. So it was very, very interesting insight into Japanese professors at the time. And I learned then, and I still think it's the same now, that Japanese publishers and Japanese are quite conservative. So that really informed my publishing. So I would be quite scared, unlike John, to have pictures of slave children and so forth. That would be really, I will find that to be risky. I would be worried that my administration might get a kurame. So kudos to you for doing that, John. Okay, and then I did some really terrible ones. English in the Media, 2006, 2007, 2008, I was approached by Kinseido with a colleague, and that was airplane money. And that was money for my son to go and visit his cousins in Canada at the time. But it was also interesting as I learned what is required by Japanese publishers. So those 3 TOEIC textbooks have the teacher's manual all published in Japanese, and the entire textbook had to be translated in Japanese for teachers. And this is the current one. That's some of my background. So I did those things, and then I tried to do print on demand, as I wanted to see what print on demand would be like as a kind of an experiment. And it was, yeah, so-so. But I learned a little bit more about the printing process and how you set the margins and those sorts of things. So that was valuable experience from the sort of the technical aspect of publishing a textbook. And now, oh, I can't hold it up anymore. Well, I can instead of my face. This is a third printing right now, actually. It's being printed right now, and hopefully I will get a hard copy in a couple of weeks. It's a third printing, and I will be printing 1,500 copies this time. I was thinking of 2,000, but I thought I should be a little bit conservative in case I lost money. Okay, I'll go into the nuts and bolts of everything. And in my case, I'm assuming that you want to have kind of a mass market textbook, not a really niche book. Okay, and so in my case, this is as the title would lead you to believe, it's about reading strategies and ways to read. Okay, so originally, as I just showed you, I was doing work for Kinseido, and then I did something in Taiwan. And so I thought I, knew some of the basics of what needs to be done. And we had enough students at our university to have a reasonable customer base. And then there's some other people in other universities, and I thought maybe Taiwan as well. So I think I could make a go of it without losing too much money. At least I hope so. And so that's what I did. But first, I was scared. I didn't want to, risk 800 or 900,000 yen. Startup cost is close to 900,000 yen. So I contacted a large publisher. It's actually Cengage, if you want to know, and they liked it. Oh, great, they liked it. But sorry, your book would just replace existing sales. So sorry about that. We can't have your book. So you have to have a really careful niche to get in there. So, okay, well, at least they liked it. That was all right. So then I approached the other ones, Kinseido and Nanundo and the others. And yeah, all 3 of them liked it. But then, as you can see below, they weren't willing to offer me very much money. So I calculated out how much I would make, and yeah, it didn't seem like it was worthwhile. And also, I don't know, some of you probably have already published with Kinseido or Nanundo or any of the Japanese publishers. You're not really an author, and you're not really doing anything other than being staff for them. They even send you a paper, a chit, at the end of the financial year, and they remove the tax for you. So that really means you're like an employee. And so I didn't want that. It was really too hard for me to negotiate with them. And so I wanted to 6% or more. Call me greedy if you want, but I wanted more. And I worked it out. It was less than minimum wage, so I didn't want to do it. And so I charged 3,000 yen for the textbook, actually plus a little bit of tax for two 15-week courses. So that's, 1,500 yen for a semester. Well, not so bad, I guess. Okay, continuing on. I had a different quality standard. Many of the domestic publishers produce a B5 book, and it's usually, well, not always black and white, but often black and white. Just, in my opinion anyway, not so nice. So I was looking for Oxford, Cambridge, Cengage kind of standard. At least that's what I hope to do. Okay? And like John, creativity, want to do everything myself. I like fiddling around with the shadows and all of that sort of stuff. Oh, okay, I want to do that. And then finally I decided, how hard can it be? And it turned out to be actually not so hard. Takes a lot of work, but not so hard. So this is what you do if you're thinking of actually starting up and doing it yourself. First, you need to get a hanko. Go to a hanko shop and get your own unique business hanko. You have to have a hanko before you go to the bank. And then you contact the ISBN agency in Tokyo and you'll get some numbers. And then maybe you should decide what's your tax status going to be depending on your situation, how much money you think you're going to make or whatever. And then choose a reliable printer, whether it's in Seoul or in my case in Taiwan. It's below, it's Asia Print. I chose a really reliable printer who does everything and really, really experienced. And also he speaks English. So I thought that was really good. And as John said earlier about shipping costs, I'll get to that, but that was a concern, but it turned out to be all right. Yeah. Then proofread your manuscript really carefully before you send it, because if you have errors, you look dumb. And then if you want to send a file, oh, what do I do? How do I send a file? Well, you can use some specific ways to send like a 3 or 4 gigabyte file. It's no problem. And then I sent them all of the files. And I also did everything in InDesign. If you don't already know, this is an ISBN code. And so you send a request to the ISBN agency in Tokyo. You can take a screenshot of anything if you want. And then you register as a publisher. You have to register as a publisher, and then you will get ISBN numbers. In my case, 10. Okay. And they stick around forever, but you have to make JAN code payments. And here's kind of what it looks like. On the left is the ISBN number, and publisher number is a 9909261. That's the publisher number, and 10082 is the category, so reading, I guess. And then the JAN code and the ISBN code. And then if you want your book to be registered forever, a copy of it will go into the National Diet Library with that little form. JAN code, I really think, is just for taxes, so that you can be tracked. And it's 3,000 yen, I think, renewed every 3 years. And that's per publisher, not per book. And this is sort of what it looks like. I delete the blue rectangles are my address. It's somewhere in Shizuoka. And so that's what it looks like. You'll get to this form, and then you have to fill out these forms. And nowadays, since we have a Google Translate and you can use your phone, you can just read through this Japanese, no problem. You could take a picture and then put it on Google Translate or on DeepL, and you can read all of this. So you don't have to be worried about Japanese so much. If you're thinking about publishing a book and knowing about the procedures, these are them. And you could take a screenshot if you want, and all of those links will lead you to the sites and the individual page where you have to get your ISBN number or your JAN code number. And you can do all of your ISBN number online too. You can generate them online. Okay, printing. So John said a little bit before, paper matters. Yes, indeed, it does matter. Also, these are just some. Printing process is pretty complex. I wouldn't have known that until I started doing this, for real, seriously. And you have to have a range of ink saturation, range from about 150 to about, I don't know, 250 maybe, somewhere in that range. So you have to be careful about, if you're using InDesign and CMYK, about your ink range, your color range. So for example, if you print a rich black, it's called rich black, it has C, M, Y, and lots of K, and it uses up a lot of ink, and that will cost more, and it will also take longer to dry. And if you have lots of full color images, it's going to cost a lot more money. And if you have a full color print, then you're going to need a clay-based paper. This is only good for, this kind of copy paper is only good for comic style, this kind of style. There are blacks, which you're going to see in a few minutes. So be careful. Consult with your printer that all of your ranges, percents are correct. Well, you need a large file size, so that you don't have to worry about a large file size. Large file size is great. Okay, and domestic or foreign printer, I used a foreign printer, and I send everything down below. You can see we transfer. How's the time? 5 minutes? Oh, here we go. So this is the technical aspect. To reduce ink, you can fade out. You can reduce the opacity of the image. And so you use less ink. This is black, actually. So you can use lots of monochrome. Actually, this isn't monochrome, but you can use a really high resolution image and then shrink it, and it will just pop out of the page. And this one is rich black, actually. And then these are also originally large images, which are shrunk down. And actually black with the white, there's not so much definition, so that was not too bad. But the second cat is a little bit more difficult. This one too, use a lot of ink. You can see there, that uses a lot of ink, so you have to be careful not to use too much ink. This one too, a lot of black there, so it took a long time to dry. And this one is true rich black, also true black. And then you can use some tricks like clouds that will fade in and out, so you don't have to worry about the definition so much. And this one also, it has black and then blends in here and there. You don't have to worry about the definition so much for these particular images. And down below, you can see two of the images have copyrights, so be careful. You have to clearly indicate if you've used someone's photo, which I've done. Hey, keep going. So here's an example of a black versus rich black. Rich black is on the right. Probably on your screen, you can see that the right side is a rich black. And then you can clearly see regular black and rich black, right? They're very different. On your computer monitor though, when you put this on your paper, you won't be able to tell the difference. So you have to be very careful about managing your blacks or dark images, because they'll become too dark. If you have two dark images together, they'll just become the same color. I'm sure Sean will be able to talk about this much better than I am, but comic style dot matrix looking, that also is really excellent. Here's an example of an actual invoice about a month ago, well, 3 weeks ago, and you can see the difference in copies. 1,500 copies will cost me 129 New Taiwan dollars, whereas 1,000 copies will cost me 166, and 2,000 copies, 104, and I opted for 1,500 copies. That's about 600 and some yen, fully. That's except for customs costs if there are any, and that's delivered on 100 weight paper. So from Taiwan, there's really not so much of a shipping problem, not now. So if you're going to think of doing a mass market book, you have to really think about, is this really worth your time? Is this really a good book? Do I really want to do this? And how is it? Because you're going to spend quite a lot of money. I have 50 seconds left. And then whatever you do, make sure that you ask people for brutally honest opinions. And I'm almost done. And finally, if you're going to make a mass market textbook, I think you have to really consider your biases. This is a business, and you want to make some money because you spent a whole year or however long you spent to produce the book. And so will everyone agree with your choices? So you have to be careful. And finally, I'm really glad that I treated mine as a business and not as kind of a piggy bank. I learned a lot in unexpected ways. Certainly my biggest mistake was thinking that customs would be easy. Actually, it turned out to be not easy. I learned a lot about layouts, and I earned way more than I would have had I gone with Kinseido or Nanundo. And I have a little picture down at the bottom. My book sales are buying this car. No exaggeration. I'm buying a Lavorg, which is a little over 4 million yen with profits. So if you do it right, you can do it right. And I'm hoping if there's intermediate adopters out there, this one is on my computer ready to go, but I don't have any buyers, and my university students are too low, so they can't manage this book. So thank you for listening to me, and if you have any comments or questions later or even now, be welcome to. I'll be happy to answer them. Anyway, that's it. Cheers.
So I'll get right to it. First, thanks to John and Greg and John for their presentation, setting this all up and everything else. Cheers, guys. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. To start, before I open my presentation, I just want to say that I want to speak to John Spiri's point, is that he was talking about, self-publishing being an opportunity for you to express yourself, publish the things that you want to exist. That's me completely. There is, I've had connections with the distributor. I'll talk about that a bit, but for the most part, I've been a self-publisher. So my presentation today is musings on marketing. So let's get to it. Let's see here. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So I've been a English teacher in Japan for 20 years. I started out at a small company called ABC Japan, then moved into Nova, and did some other eikaiwa between here and there, and also then I moved into the junior high school private school circuit. And it was, a wonderful experience, but I kept running into, I ended up in one eikaiwa where I had students with specific needs. But through all my educational career, I've always tried to think about, how to combine education and entertainment. The idea that, we go to school every day and we're presented with lots of different materials, and a lot of the engagement is, I remember my teachers telling me, well, it's up to you to engage yourself in the material, and or it's up to the teacher to sell that material. And I thought, well, that kind of makes for lazy material, doesn't it? So I often, that was always in the back of my mind throughout. It's like, what kind, but this was, over the course of several years. So taking my love of both education and games, I started thinking about, well, what could I do? How could I bring these two things together? And, I used to do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons when I was younger, and a lot of video games here and there. And I really enjoyed those things, and they played a big part in why I became a teacher. But as someone who likes to be accountable for his time, as I played more games and I spent more time, having fun, I wanted to make that time matter for something, to become a product of some sort, to give something back, as a result of all this creative fun and games and entertainment that was given to me over the years. So my first venture into that was Question Quest. I was teaching at a Kiowa, like I said earlier, and I had a lot of students. I'd come off the teaching kids on the NOVA system where, they would teach kids the answer to a question, ask them the question, and then they would answer. And that was kind of the overall system. And I noticed that, because there was a lot of turnover and the kids kind of came and went, that there wasn't a lot of opportunity to teach the students the question. It was always, the kids would speak when spoken to. I'm like, okay. So I kind of decided, well, what if we did something to give them power? So I just stole a Magic the Gathering template, made like 200 cards, and play tested this concept I had. And it eventually, there's a longer story to it, but it eventually became Question Quest. However, I teamed up with my partner at the time. He's Patrick Reynolds. He's the CEO of Kenzai Body, a health and fitness program. If you want to lose weight, I highly recommend it. But the point is that I said to him, I showed him the game. He said, do I have something here? And he's like, yeah, I think you do. So we started sitting down, talking about costs, but he wouldn't let it out the door. And we both agreed that we wouldn't do it unless we could compete, not with the school textbooks. That's easy. They're dry looking. Let's compete with the games. Let's compete with the stuff that is, taking our students' attention away from, our academics. It's a bit like the positive side of drinking. You start out with the light stuff, but eventually you get used to it. You move to the hard stuff. And that's kind of the concept here. Is if you think about comics, a lot of people give you slack for your kids reading comics. May I remind you, they're reading. I've often seen, what I think we often forget is comics are sort of the guardians of our literacy. When kids can't get engaged in the more adult or more mature material or the more dry material, the comics are there to at least get them to want to read, to continue reading until they, are met by a teacher or something that eventually turns them around. So, but when my time in Question Quest, I learned quite a bit. So, for example, your product should always be equal or of higher quality than your competition. So always know who you're competing against. An effective website is elegant, not busy. My partner just said, okay, you're doing the website. What? Yeah. So, I learned very quickly what to do with website. There's a lot of good website design sites out there nowadays. I highly recommend learning how to do it. It's hard at first, but once you get it, you can control it. That is one of the distributors I worked with. One of the problems they always had is whenever they wanted to change something, they had to call up the person who took care of their website. So nothing got done for a week. Whereas I can now do it instantly. My partner wants to change or I want to change, boom, done, 3 seconds. Digital products are easier to make than physical products. This is true. We live in a digital age now, and especially since I'm in the business of manga, most people read manga digitally. So that's where I need to be. Amazon recently set it up that I could do print on demand. However, my partner and I are still talking about whether or not we're going to move into that area until Japan takes a specific interest in us. Team members come and go with each project. My team on Question Quest and my team on my Street Fighter project and my team on Crystal Hunters are all entirely different. So, always be prepared to see people come and go as you move through your entrepreneurial adventures. And a great story is the most important part of every product. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in the presentation. But like I said, my next project, like after I'd done Question Quest, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. We managed to pull it off. And I was like, well, I was sitting in a restaurant. I was like, well, what do I want to do next? What do I really, 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 really want? And so there was this Street Fighter comic that the current publishers of the title at the time weren't doing. So I decided, well, I'll go ahead and make it myself, because I'd seen a lot of fan projects out there. So I set up a Facebook page, I set up a blog, started blogging about my progress. I hired an art team, which eventually snowballed into 3 art teams. I ended up with artists coming to me of their own volition saying, hey, we heard about this project, can we contribute? It's like, yeah, you can totally contribute. And I also hired artists to do like on places like Fiverr and Upwork and, a lot of other, Upwork used to be called like Odesk, and other little places where I could find them if there were certain pictures that I wanted to have. So I worked with artists from all over the world. When all is said and done, I've worked with about 320 artists over the course of my adventures. So I have I have a very clear idea what's the difference between an amateur and a pro, and I'll give a little bit of insight into that as we move forward. But yeah, so this was the Street Fighter project I did. It's out and around. The blog still exists. If you want to see a venture into my poor and geeky fan world, help yourself. The book is out there for free. I never charged for it, of course, because it's based on copyrighted work, but it's still out there. I still get email about it, and people still enjoy it to this day. So what I learned from the Street Fighter project, I know how to work with and manage artists and writers online to produce a comic. If I want the product of my dreams to exist, I need to make it myself, not wait for someone else to make it. Okay, so those were my two biggest takeaways from the Street Fighter project. I'm just going to move. So then after I'd done these two projects, I was approached by Nathaniel French, who's my current partner in Crystal Hunters, and he has some background in. He works at Komazawa University, and he said, well, would you be interested in doing a graded reader? My answer was swift, no, because I've worked with graded readers, and the first thing you always get from students is eye rolls. It's either, and schools have tons and tons of them. All the schools I've worked at, I've walked into rooms where there's libraries, they're on shelves, and they're untouched. It's like nobody, they're made, the schools buy them, the admin buys them, the teachers are thrilled about them, but the actual person who's supposed to read them isn't. And now this is just from my experience. You're free to argue with me, or, I'm sure you have your own classrooms and everything else that goes on, but, and besides, the market is saturated. There's if you're going to go and create something like a graded reader, be aware that there's thousands ahead of you, and the schools have already bought many of them, and it's going to take a lot of, they're going to have to make another room on a shelf to put your stuff. So, it's just something to think about. Know your market as you prepare to make something. Again, if it's something you want to use in your classroom, which Question Quest was in my case, then yes, go ahead and make it, have it for your classroom. But be aware if you have, your site set on sales, what you might be in for. So after this talk about graded readers, we did manage to talk with my old artist on Question Quest, and we eventually, I'll just, a couple of points. So this is just a couple of points that graded readers are designed to interest school teachers and school administrators, not to interest students first. This was my takeaway. And of course, the mention of the saturated market. But we talked a little bit more with my old artist on Question Quest, and we thought about, well, why don't we just do a straight up manga? Why not? So with really simple language. And we thought, that's going to be crazy. But we gave it a try anyway, and Crystal Hunters was born. And so we hired our first artist on Question Quest. She quit because she couldn't handle the schedule. Then we hired another artist through Upwork, and she tried to take over the story and change the vision, so that ended. And then we finally got our artist that we have now. And we got it finally done, and we released in Japan with our English version. And the reception was meh, again, like I said earlier, the market was pretty saturated when it comes to easy English readers. And, the thing about Japanese students is Japanese students can read cool manga in their own language anytime they want. So they're not, as hungry to read it in English. But again, this was a question of my passion kind of clouding my market knowledge, the idea that I was so excited to get this manga out there, just like I was for Question Quest. And, I wasn't looking clearly at my market, an oversaturated market of English materials that is very hard to break into. So the next thing though, but we weren't done. We were a little worried, a little nervous. We're like, oh God, but this isn't doing so well. But we did plan to do other languages. So the next language we thought to do was Japanese. And we thought, this is weird. A bunch of foreigners making a Japanese manga in Japan. Okay, fine. But the minute we released, boom, the sales started. And we were just like, what is going on? But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people who are studying Japanese. And for the main reason is they want to be able to read manga. And, and they want that opportunity to be part of that world. So we were really surprised at how popular we were as we started to release across social media. But a couple of takeaways from that experience is, when Crystal Hunters took off in the Japanese market, we were caught off guard. We had no idea this would happen. So when it did, we were just like, wow. So figure out your market and how to reach them. I can't stress this enough. I know you're hungry to make, whatever it is you want to make, but, take a couple of days or a week and figure out who wants this thing, because there is, you may be making it for yourself, but there is part of you that wants to sell this thing. I'm sure of it. So, take your time to know your market. Second, make sure your product works equally well in, 2 or more languages, because, Japan might not want you, but India might, Indonesia might, depending on how your product is, there are other markets. I know a guy who made a math card game. Nobody cared in North America, but Indonesia loved it. So just some things to think about. This is a review from Tofugu. I was going to read it, but I'm a little short on time, so I don't want to. But the idea is, once we started getting more and more popular in Japanese, if you go to Tofugu, you can actually read this review. They talked about how useful we were for beginners, how, all our free material in terms of supporting the manga is very accessible. This was a surprise review. We didn't know this was coming. And so it was really nice to get reviewed by such a premier site. So now I'm just going to finish up with a few more tips to help you in terms of your self-publishing. Like I said before, know your market was the first one. The second one is make sure, your product functions in, 2 or more languages. And here are just a few other things I've learned along the way. A little caveat beforehand, you may agree or disagree with what I have to say here, but this is through, free projects and some very hard knocks and a lot of lost money. So, take what wisdom or you want from these. So tip number 3, the creator makes the final decision. I can't stress this enough. Anybody you decide to hire has to understand this. Having worked with, like I said, over 200 artists, it sucks when you are suddenly, you say to them their creative input is welcome, and it is. And I'll tell you, I've had some magnificent pieces and panels as a result of the artist's input. But they also send you stuff where you've got to come back and say, sorry, but I understand, but this isn't what we wanted, so please change it. And the artist we have now, he is amazing. There is no debate. But I have had too many debates with artists who, and this is my fault for not saying that, no, this is my vision. This needs to go my way. I'm welcome. Your idea will be respected and considered. I think of it as a little bit like, Picard on the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise, where he has all his people around him and they all give their opinions, and then he walks away and comes back, and then everybody else carries out that decision. That is the kind of relationship you want with the people you hire, okay? Because at the end of the day, this is your vision, and you can't have that interfered with. You can have it contributed to and so on, but make sure that the final word is yours. In fact, my partners and I all have situations where we are the final word. Okay, and then debate. You can argue till you're blue in the face, but once we make that final decision after hearing everything, then the debate is over. And that's why we have 4 books out now instead of just 1. Here's just a taste of, how speedy my artist, this is a hyper speed, but this is just an example of some of the work that our artist does. He's, we got a chance he did this little sketch up for us. It's on our website, on the Crystal Hunters website, if you want to check it out. But it just, shows you an idea of our manga coming to life. It's just amazing to watch, the things that you have hoped for, the things you planned, the things you scripted come to life. All right, so number 4, keep the relationship with your hires professionally distant. It's nice to have dinners and welcome the people into your house with your family and all that until they quit. So I highly recommend that, if you're going to hire somebody to work for you, if you want to make, good friends with them and that, do it after the project. Or, after things are done. I'm not saying be mean or rude. I'm just saying keep things professional, because at the end of the day, you're the one handing money across the table. And I guarantee you when they walk away, they're not going to give it back. So, it's something that you're going to have to, consider. This is where contracts and a lot of other stuff. But when you're starting out, you sometimes think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have a contract. Maybe I should keep this friendly. Maybe I should keep this a gentleman's agreement. Watch out. Okay, so I strongly advise, keep relationships with anybody you hire professionally distant until your project is finished. Don't buy social media ads. This is the biggest waste of money on the planet, at least for a startup. You need to spend at least $100,000 American before Facebook starts to matter. All the likes that you get most of the time are bots. And, a like is like someone put a standee in your store. They're there as a cardboard image, but they don't give you any money. So I see a lot of people get excited about social media likes and stuff like that. I stopped counting likes a long time ago. My advice is dig into where your fans are. You got to know your market, so go find them. Where are they? What social media platform are they hanging out on? What mods do you need to talk to? What groups do you need to join? Every half hour of every, in the morning, I'm doing that. I'm on the social media, finding out where my fans are and, communicating with them. Beware of amateur marketers. There's a lot of people out there when you start to get a little traction that will approach you saying that they can, get you on this social media platform, or they can set this up for you, or they can do this. Nah, I wouldn't bother if I were you. Again, this is something you want to be able to do yourself. They promise you a lot, but they talk about engagement, but at the end of the day, that's likes, not money. Learn to do as much as you can by yourself. So the idea is like your website, your marketing, all of it. The more you can do, the less people you have to rely on, the less people you have to pay. So, it can, and you have more skills so that if your project either works out or doesn't work out, you can still maybe join another team or be part of something else as a result of everything you've learned. So I really recommend that. Always give something away for free. If you have a book or a sample or something of your work, at the Crystal Hunters website, all our teaching materials are 100% free, and the first book of the manga is free in all languages. You have to read it online, but you still get it free. So it's all there for consumption. And free material gets shared even if people don't buy stuff, and it gets out to different people. So you find more customers that way. So don't be afraid to give something away for free, even if it's your first book. It's totally worth it. Our bestseller, by the way, is our first book, and it's free. Read these 2 books before starting. I can't stress this enough. If you, these 2 books, basically, I'll use the religious sentence, changed my life. Ignore Everybody and 39 Keys to Creativity by Hugh MacLeod, and This is Marketing by Seth Godin. The first book is what gave me the courage to do all this in the first place. The second book, had I read it, just a few months earlier, would have easily saved me about $3,000. So again, I can't recommend, these books are an excellent choice if you're looking for some pre-reading before you get into your actual project. And finally, love your product because nobody else is for years. Okay, it's going to take a lot of work to get it done. It's going to take a lot of work to get it finished, and you might have a crappy launch. But, as long as you continue to care, as long as you continue to work on it and make it better, eventually, you'll find your market. And even if you don't, you'll have amassed a ton of skills for the next thing you decide to do. So, and there's our 4th book, which just released a few weeks ago. But again, my name is Sean Anderson, and you can reach me at these SeanSensei13@gmail.com, or you can contact us at the Crystal Hunters website, www.crystalhuntersmanga.com. Everybody, thank you for listening.